Hey guys, thank you so much and welcome to the Game Your Future podcast. I'm Daniel and I have a special guest for you today. This is Heath Gildwel, also known as HP Gildwel, writer, author of the book Drunk Wizard and the Cowardly Knight, and is a self-proclaimed nerd, geek, and gamer. So thank you so much, Heath. Welcome. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you doing today?
Doing fantastic. No, thank you for being with us. So tell us a little bit more about the Drunk Wizard and the Cowardly Knight and how you got into writing too.
I kind of wrote as a therapeutic measure when I was in high school, and I never published any of that really. But I kind of held on to ideas as I was going through life. I wrote for the college newspaper whenever I went to college. Got front page a couple of times, and I had this fantasy idea running around in my head quite a bit. I actually wrote it several times, at least the first few parts, changing perspectives, changing styles, and then for about 10 years, I had this idea, and my partner, we married and everything, and they're like, "Hey, you should try and publish that. You should go for it." So I went ahead and finished up writing Drunk Wizard and the Cowardly Knight, and went through a couple rounds of editing, and yeah, that's kind of how I got into writing. And I've just been consuming every YouTube video and book I could think of about writing. I can look right up there. Self-editing for fiction writers and The Anatomy of Genre are on my shelf right now. I know somewhere I've got The Elements of Style. Maybe it's
There
a
you
Kindle
go.
book.
Fantastic. And so that love of writing combined with gaming, right? So a nerd, a geek, a gamer.
Yeah.
Also tell me a little bit about kind of your gaming history, your gaming experience as well.
I've played video games on both console and PC. I really like picking up tabletop RPG systems. So I'm a big fan of Fate Core, Pathfinder, Pathfinder 2, D&D 5e. At least before the controversy, I was more of a fan. Um,
Sure.
and I've also picked up D20, D20 Future, D20 Modern. I've played games all over the place in that if that makes sense.
Oh, yeah.
Um, I like weird systems sometimes. Like I played a Weird West system where you had poker chips instead and drew cards from the deck instead of rolling dice.
Ah, interesting. Yeah, because I've always associated tabletop with the good old D20, right? So, and of course, I haven't played since yeah, somebody's been trying to get me back into D&D 5e, but I haven't played since like 3.5. So kind of date
Well,
myself and back when I played D&D, I was like, okay. So
a lot of people have described Pathfinder as 3.75.
okay, interesting.
So it to go from 3.5 to Pathfinder, basically the combat maneuver rules are the same thing as the grapple rules, but much better, cleaner.
Grapple was always,
And
yeah.
all the classes basically have all of the 3.5 power creep rolled into them. So all of the optimized build stuff that you used to be able to do is just kind of rolled in.
Nice.
And then they
Okay.
expanded on it for a while.
Okay. All right, good to know. All right, that's kind of interesting because that was definitely my jam was 3.5. So it sounds like Pathfinder might be right up my alley. Awesome. But yeah, so as part of the podcast, we love to talk about just, gaming in general, and then as far as taking some of our gaming skills and rolling it into the rest of our lives and having these kind of transferable skills. So it's interesting you mentioned, the love and the passion for gaming as well as writing. And so I don't know if you've thought about this or explored it yourself, but I wanted to kind of, explore with you if you haven't, as far as how do you think gaming has affected your writing?
So first, writing backstories as a player character was very cool. So I was able to wrap some of that into creating backstories and narrative and kind of world building. Um, and that started off with a character named Roscoe Thistleif, a halfling barbarian. Um, and
Interesting.
that was a lot of fun. And then I started to DM and later GM as the more generic term, game master.
Yeah.
And I ran a Legend of Zelda campaign for my friends, and that went on
Oh,
for about a year. But creating the world and filling in all the world bases, even with like a fandom to like kind of give you a leg up, is a good way to exercise a lot of your world building, a lot of your conflict resolution curve. So you have a conflict, and then your characters resolve it, and then you create a new conflict either from the resolution of that or just apropos of nothing, like you start the loop over. Uh, that's really important for writing.
Hmm.
And kind of learning to listen was a good skill because as a GM, you have to listen to your players before you respond. And you have to listen and understand what they're trying to do or something like that. So you have to listen to understand first. That's a very good skill. So being a DM actually made me a better writer. One, because, I could construct a scenario and realize that I did not have all the answers out of the fly, or right off the bat. Um, I I think that helped me a lot just as a writer running a tabletop RPG. And then and I learned some of this from watching like the extra credits podcast and or animatic video from YouTube. Some writing in games can create that conflict resolution curve, the tension release curve if you're going to write something scary or horrifying, generating puzzles, that kind of thing. That also has been extremely helpful in writing.
Okay, so it's just showing or watching how the game kind of unfolds, right? With these kind of you mentioned that that kind of tension and release moments, and kind of how the good games will actually like the pacing, I guess, of the game that gets you engaged and like lets you off in certain moments and brings you back, and really following that kind of style, right? When you get into writing, right, is what you're saying.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yeah. So yeah. The idea of the action reaction loop is really important if you want to create flow in writing. And that kind of happens naturally in games. There are games that are like narrative based as opposed to combat based, like Pathfinder 3.5. It's really a combat game with some role playing on top of it.
Hmm.
Whereas games like Fate Core are much more narratively based, like they actually have scenes as part of their rule structure. Um,
Okay.
in Fate, you know how you have regenerating health in Halo?
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, you're regenerating shield or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, so in Fate, you don't have hit points, you have stress tracks. And you can get enough stress to get injured in a particular scene, but if you make it through the whole scene without exhausting all of your stress, then your stress is wiped away. And you might have an injury or some consequence if you go above that. It's
Mm,
kind of weird.
okay.
Um, if you know D20 system, it's kind of like you have spell slots, but for stress.
Huh.
And there's mental and physical stress. So it's
Very
kind of
interesting.
interesting. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that does sound very interesting because yeah, and I think Halo was a great example to share with it, especially Halo 1 because it had like a very specific health bar and shield bar, right? I think some of
Oh,
the
yeah.
other Halos might have even done away with the health bar if I remember correctly, and they just had the regenerating shield, and that
Yeah,
was it.
it was a big pivot point for first person shooters and a lot of games, especially the life bar mechanic, where you had a certain amount of standing health and then you would regenerate if you could get to cover for long enough, right?
Yes, that's I remember a lot of those kind of games, especially like Gears of War, I think at the time was a great one where yeah, just simply being behind cover and not getting hit, you suddenly regenerated your hit points. And I was like, very interesting. I
Yeah.
was like, it's not a
Speaking of,
shield that's regenerating like Halo. It's just like, oh no, I'm just better now. And you're like,
yeah.
okay.
By the way, Gears of War with the Hammer of Dawn and like the big laser, awesome.
Oh yeah, absolutely love that. So much fun. So okay, so as far as yeah, so we're talking like so the writing and how DM how being a DM being a GM has really helped you, and part of that sounds to me like having this kind of visceral moment like where you're in the game, right? And part of the immersion of the games I think is so powerful, and what a lot of us don't see is like yeah we're engrossed in the game, we're embedded in the game, we feel like we're the characters, and yes, that's what the game devs are going for. But at the same time, you can take that out of that. You can take that skill back out and say like, oh, being in there and being immersed in that, and now I can understand what's happening around me and translating that to your writing.
Yes.
That is fantastic. Super cool. So, is there anything else as far as I guess the writing? It's like the writing style. Like we have like different genres of game, right? So, and you mentioned going through different styles of writing. Can you tell us, yeah, if, even for me, who's not as well versed in writing books and structure and what that means? So, would you help me understand, and maybe some of the audience, as far as if I have game genres, what are kind of the writing genres, and how did you kind of progress through those?
So there's an idea of narrative distance. So this can go towards games a little bit easier because books are a non-interactive format and games are an interactive format. So you need
Yep.
to be aware. There are some hybrid books out there that will have like a choose your own adventure book that's more interactive. There was actually a Metroid RPG manga that you could do, and you would keep track of your health points and go different places and backtrack, etc.
Ah,
And that was kind of interesting that whenever I found out about it.
yeah, I had
But
not heard of that one. Very cool.
but in terms of narrative distance, there's first person perspective, which creates sort of a limited information. That's most like most games. Like any kind of game that you see that's a AAA studio game is almost certainly going to have that. You don't know everything in the world. You only have access to like the local area. You might have access to your inventory, maybe a codex, like if you're in Mass Effect. You don't know how the game ends. You don't have perfect information. And that is sort of like third person limited.
Mm.
If you're in a first person shooter, that might be more first person limited. Um, and then if you were to look at a game like chess, chess is more like third person omniscient because you can see all the positions of your enemy player, all the positions of your pieces, and how they might interact. And
Hmm.
that's more of a strategy puzzle game, right? When it
Yeah,
all comes down to it. Instead of more like an action RPG like Diablo 2 or something like that.
gotcha. And then I assume that there's I guess the fully omniscient, right? We don't really have in games, right? As far as yeah, even kind of the strategy games, I'm thinking kind of RTS, right? Where it's like, okay, you might be able to see on a bigger scale how things interact, but you still are kind of hidden by a fog of war to actually go out and find them to see what they're
Exactly.
actually doing.
Right. And Zerg Rush before they nerfed it, Zerg Rush.
And
Um,
make sure to Zerg Rush before that, or offensive cannons. That was always weird to me too.
right. And so like you have this idea of narrative distance where the amount of information the reader has is not necessarily the amount of information the character has, the point of view character.
Aha.
And something else that you can pull from games is I'm going to lean on fantasy here because that's what I'm writing at the moment. I
Yep.
haven't dipped my toes into sci-fi yet. Um, if you look at games like Diablo 2, I'm going to use that as a very iconic example. Whenever you are playing the barbarian class character, right?
Hmm.
In the actual official narrative, he has like a real name, but you get to name him. When you are playing through the game, eventually get to Act 5. And Act 5, spoilers for anyone who's never played this 20-year-old game, um, when you get to Mount Ararat, that's where the barbarian's actually from, and they will talk to that barbarian differently
Mm.
uh,
Yep.
than they will to the other characters who are foreigners, right? You don't get any necessary bonuses, but the narrative changes. It's more like you come home, right? And that characterizes the story differently. So technically, like there's multiple stories layered in here because you have different characters. The like the sorceress has a different narrative set while they're in while they're in Act 1, right? This changes like the relationships between characters. So that's something that you can pull in. And then anything that character says in a game has got to be very efficient in that both got to display information. So like, hey, I was hit, hey, I took damage, etc. But the way they say it provides characterization. So if it's uh, I am overburdened, right? I can't care anymore. Those are two ways of saying the same thing, but they mean different things
Mm.
uh, for what the character's feeling. I can't carry anymore means I'm tired. I'm overburdened might mean any number of things, like you're stressed out in addition to not having too much weight to carry. Um, or it might be I can't carry any more for you type thing. So you can be very efficient in dialogue by saying something different than saying something that implies more meaning than just the information in the text.
Gotcha. So, I guess, do you have any experience with game writing as well? So, like, I know we're looking at kind of the examples and we can see how it all happens, but I assume that game writing sounds like it might even be more difficult in some ways because you have to be prepared, especially for these different kind of scenarios where if the player has choice and agency over their character, whether it's their class, race, whatever, and how the world interacts with that character, if you make that different, that just sounds like inherently more complicated.
So if you're making narrative for the character in a story, I'm going to pull from another popular game, Destiny 2. I
Mhm.
think Extra Credits said this, but I'm going to try and repeat it here, just because it's really good.
Mhm.
There's long stretches in Destiny and Destiny 2 where you kind of walk, and the only person who can talk is your little floating buddy, your techno Navi.
Yep.
Um, and they'll just keep spouting one-liners, or sometimes they'll talk about like things that happened before the war, like one of the old great war mines or something like that. Delivering that backstory is really good, right? But if they are basically just making funny jokes, unless it's incredibly funny, you probably want to spend that more on characterizing the character, or maybe talking about something that's going to happen. Like you talk about, man, I really don't want to deal with Axel heads or whatever enemy type it is because they are scary, right? Um, or you could arguably say like the talking little box that floats around is the main character and you're just along for the ride. Um,
It has
if
more
that's
lines
the
than you do, right?
and they got way more lines than you do, right? So if they are in that scenario, then you need to know more about like the personality of this character. Are they like willing to betray you? Are they the local? Are they loyal friend? Are they? Do they have other goals and aspirations after you get back to base? Like, oh yeah, I saw this other floating navvy that like I'm gonna get their number and we're gonna do an IP chat, wink, wink, or something like. How do you do this? So when you talk about game dialogue, you have to be extremely efficient because you don't get that much of it. It's kind of like it's more difficult to write a great short story than it is to write a great novel. Don't get me wrong. A
Yeah.
novel is a huge undertaking,
Right.
but to write a great short story, you have to be incredibly efficient.
Mm,
So that's one thing in game writing. The other thing in game writing is you have to write the scenario very well, and make sure that that's tonally consistent. Um, if it's tonally consistent, then it is uh, if it's tonally consistent, then that means that like, okay, so I'm going into the dark and dreary thing. I'm either going to have like a redemption where this dark and dreary becomes success, but things happen, or I am going into like a sort of cutesy rainbow bright type of land. Keep it that theme unless that intentional turn of theme is important. And even then, you need to keep enough through points that that one twist stands out more. So there's
yeah.
a lot of things in game writing. I don't write for games, so I want to say I'm speaking from a place of armchair game writing, but I
Right.
do
So,
write D&D campaigns. So
gotcha.
that's
So
that's
D&D
my experience.
campaigns and write your own novels. And of course, being a gamer, being able to sit in it and observe it with that mindset and
Right.
that kind of lens. Okay. Yep. Absolutely. So I think one of the other questions that I would have then, as far as so, maybe I'll ask it a very broad question, maybe a loaded question, is that does that mean that writing for games is inherently harder in that sense because it has to be this kind of more efficient, very much more short kind of situation with a lot
So
more nuance, or
I think it depends on the game.
Mhm.
If it's a game genre and you're just cracking jokes, sometimes it can be just as fun, depending on how good you are writing jokes. Like just as easy, just as fun. But when it comes to like these bigger epic games, and you have to be consistent with the narrative, and you can't have any retcons, you have to have kind of a writing bible, like a world bible. Um, and then when you're working with many writers, like
Mhm.
the look at Skyrim. Skyrim had a massive number of writers, like 30 writers for the story. And they had the primary story, which I'm sure was like two or three people, but then they had all these side quests. All of the books that have stories inside Skyrim had their own authors, right? Someone wrote that. Um, and when you're working inside the world, if you're doing it apropos of nothing, then there's no conflict. If you go into the past and say this happened and this happened and this happened, right? Um, but when it comes to consistency, that's where it becomes really difficult between multiple people. Um, and it becomes more difficult because everyone has their own copy of part of the world Bible in their head, the part that they're responsible for, and you need to especially have communication between that. Um, and then sometimes you have to deal with like a silent protagonist. A silent protagonist is essentially an audience that is performing actions, but they're an audience, right? That is a very different way than we've been taught in narratives to write. They're very much inactive when it comes to actually like showing emotions and doing things. But sometimes you'll have games like what was that called? It's the one where the guy goes on an adventure, Drake something.
Oh, gosh, not The Last of Us, the other. Now
Right.
I'm blanking my. I'm sure I'm gonna get torn up in the
But The
comments.
Last of Us is a great example too, where you
Yeah,
actually have characters that have names, they have dialogue. You're playing these characters, and even during the game, they're emitting dialogue that show their character, right?
yeah.
I think one of the best parts of The Last of Us that I heard about was um, like he keeps telling Ellie, "You can't have a gun. You can't have a gun. You're just a kid, right? You're just a kid. You can't have a gun." And then in one cutscene, Ellie uses a gun. I mean, um, it's it's kind of foreshadowing, but also it's telling you that geez, I completely blanked on his name, but the main character of Last of Us, um, he uh, he is very protective of this kid and believes that she needs to remain a kid, which
It
is like
was
old world thinking from before
Joel, I
the
think, right?
games. One more time,
Joel.
Joel. You're right, Joel.
Yeah, and I think the other game, the Drake is the main character, was Uncharted.
That's it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So was
Uh,
Uncharted, or even like maybe even like The Legend of Zelda, right?
yeah, yeah.
Link is
So
is very much a silent protagonist. Yeah. Grunts and groans maybe, but no dialogue.
yeah, he's very much a silent protagonist. He makes no narrative. I think in Ocarina of Time, he's one of the most vocal he's ever been, where he's actually says his name to he says his name, which you typed in as the player, so it's your name when you write it in. Um, but he says his name to Zelda, and it's one of the only times he speaks like in the whole series.
That's
Um,
incredible. Yeah, just thinking
if you
about
do,
that. Yeah.
as long as you don't count the CDI games where he could not shut up fast enough.
No, we'll quietly forget those. That's
But no, the
or the
but
cartoon.
no, he's a silent protagonist. He's definitely like out on a mission. In A Link to the Past, he was out on a mission. His uncle did all the talking,
Yep.
and then you just kind of run around, right?
Hmm. And silent protagonist, I think one of my favorite silent protagonists from my favorite game of all time, Chrono Trigger on the Super Nintendo.
Oh yeah,
And Chrono was a silent protagonist. Like, everybody reacted to what supposedly Chrono was saying. And like apparently he might have been saying something, but like he was never it was never shown. It was never fully acknowledged
yeah.
that like, oh, he said this. It's like, no, you don't know what he said.
Though it's kind of funny because he doesn't really talk, and at the beginning of the game, you get into that courthouse situation, right?
Hmm.
Because like you stole my sandwich, you know.
He can't defend himself. It's like he's silent.
He has the right to remain silent.
He had the right to remain silent. He used that for sure. It's too funny. Okay, so what I want to make sure too is if there's anything else that we need to discuss as far as like love to this conversation as far as like using or looking at writing through this kind of gaming lens, right? Is there anything that we haven't talked about yet in your mind as far as how writing has has shaped, has taken form for you using this gaming lens?
Um, so games kind of teach me something that I was kind of taught the opposite of in school, and it's kind of toxic. But in elementary school, essentially, we're taught you start with 100, and then anything you do wrong, you lose points, right? And that kind of caps your potential. Like
Mhm.
you can only ever get a 100%. You might get a 102 if you're really lucky, right?
Mhm.
Like on one grade or something.
Yep.
Um, Whereas in life, it's more like you're starting at zero, and anything you do actually is positive. You are building up. It gives you more momentum. And that's how
Mhm.
it is in games, right? So Metroid, RPGs, Ocarina of Time, and in Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, you start off without anything. You can roll and you can pick up rocks, I think.
Yep.
And then you go and you grab a sword. And then you go and you grab a shield. And suddenly you can go on an adventure, but you have to increase your power to do that, right? So you are making positive forward change. Playing all these games kind of tells me that I can make that positive forward change because when you're writing anything of any real length, in terms of narrative, it is you're creating a world out of whole cloth. Even if you're basing it off of reality and you're like writing vampires in New York City, okay, you're still creating everything out of whole cloth. You have to remember that 43rd Street and 8th Street never meet in this kind of world, right? You have to remember
Yep.
these details, and you have to immerse yourself in it, and then you have to write. And as you write, you start to like have self doubts and all these kinds of things. This is something that happens with everybody. I've kind of stalled out on my book too a little bit. I still have ideas and I'm still writing things down, but I kind of got to a point where I was burning out. Um, I I've taken some time to rest up. I'm almost done with my burnout and all the other things that have like piled on to make that burnout happen.
Gotcha.
Um, so so what the biggest thing I've taken away from games is that it's always good to do something, even if it's not that much. Anything's better than a zero, right?
I love that. So it's all about this kind of forward momentum, forward progress, right? And I
Yeah.
love that because games, I absolutely, you know, echo that message that games give us that sense of progression, right? So all the great games that you start at some, level one, whatever you want to call it, just like this infant level, basically, and you're growing and changing and getting more powerful as a result. And sometimes it is very on the nose with like level and experience to say, yep, I'm level 10 now, so I am more powerful than I was. But I love the Legend of Zelda example too, where there's not necessarily levels, but these RPG elements to say like, oh, well, I have, like I have the sword now, or
Hmm.
you get these various tools that make you more powerful. So that
Yeah.
sense of progress, and I haven't heard it described that way, as far as starting from nothing and building as far as like in a grade system, like because you make a very good point, right? It's always docking points when we're in school, right? And in both gaming and in life, in the whole, is like no, it's all about building and growing. So
Exactly.
very amazed. Yeah, I love that take on it. So fantastic. And really can't think of a better way to cap off this particular episode. And thank you for that, Heath. And I just definitely have a question as far as where can people find more about you, more about your book? Tell us how we can get in touch.
So, as an indie author, I have an LLC. It's a Sequence of Letters LLC. The catchphrase is one good word deserves another.
Nice.
So I own sequenceofletters.com. You can always go there, sign up for my mail list. I haven't sent out a whole lot of newsletters, but when I do, I send them out. Then my book, Drunk Wizard and the Cowardly Knight, is on all things Amazon. I'm actually on Kindle Unlimited as well. And I believe it's available on barnesandnoble.com. Um, it has a new cover at the moment. This is kind of a retro cover. I'm trying this out for a year. And next year I
Mhm.
might revert to a more modern cover. But
Okay.
if you want the this cover, it's pretty nice.
Awesome. And
Oh,
we'll
and
definitely have
my
the
book
links
is
for
all
everybody in
AI
the show
free.
notes. Yeah.
Sorry.
I would say we'll have those links for everybody down below. Check the description so you can check out where to get the books. That Drunk Wizard and the Cowardly Knight. I love that too. Fantastic. And last question before we go that I ask everyone, which is, what is your favorite video game?
My favorite video game would probably be Final Fantasy IX.
Ah, very good one. That's I haven't heard that one yet. So I've heard a lot of seven. I've heard of some eights, and I think you're the first person that said nine. So very cool.
Final Fantasy IX is criminally underrated. Like most of the characters get a really great story. Some of them don't get as much story as they really deserve, but
Mhm.
it's still a wonderful game. And if you get the mods for it from the Steam version, it looks incredibly amazing. Like
Oh,
get the Moguri mod, it just best way to experience the game.
gotcha. Very cool. So, gosh, thank you so much, Heath. Thank you for being here. This has been fantastic. And, guys, I hope you enjoyed. Hope you learned a little bit about how to look through things through that gaming lens, especially around writing. That's very cool. So, guys, thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for watching. And remember, stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.